Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
The only constant in Austin seems to be change, whether that be the people moving here, the buildings defining our skyline, or the startups being founded and funded. Today, my guest is Krishna Srinivasan, founding partner of LiveOak Ventures. We will explore what it means to invest in Texas startups yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Krishna is a co-founder of LiveOak Venture Partners and has been investing in early-stage Texas-based companies and entrepreneurs since 2000. His active board involvements at LiveOak include Disco, NYSE, Law, Backflip, Eventus Systems, Homeward, Kinjo, Litlingo, Nata Finance, Ojo Labs, RealWork Labs, Rollick, Schoolinks, and Talent Guard. His notable past investments include Digital Pharmacist, acquired by K1, Hive9, acquired by Brandmaker, Iris Plans, acquired by Aladade, Mavenir Systems, NYSE, MVNR, Opsity, acquired by News Corp, Stack Engine, acquired by Oracle, Telestacks, acquired by Mavenir. Prior to co-founding LiveOak in 2012, Krishna was a partner at Austin Ventures. Previously, he worked at Motorola, where he wrote large-scale optimization software for supply chain planning and worked with a variety of business units on strategic and operational issues. He started his professional career at Semitech. Krishna currently serves as chairman of the Miracle Foundation Board, an Austin-based nonprofit organization that supports orphanages in India and foster care programs in the United States. He also serves as vice chair of the board of PBS Austin and previously chaired the strategic planning committee of the board. When he's not working, you can find him running the trails of Austin, practicing yoga, and spending time with his wife and 3 kids. I hope you enjoy our wide-ranging conversation. Krishna, welcome to the Austin Next podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to start off really big picture here. Why Texas?
Well, first of all, it's all I know. And this story goes back to 25 years ago when I joined the venture capital business here in Texas. Joined a well-known firm then called Austin Ventures. Straight out of business school, right at the beginning of 2000. Spent a little over a decade at Austin Ventures as the firm continued to grow in strength to be the dominant force in this market. Was grown to be one of the most respected firms around the nation, given its lineage goes back to 1970s for its formation. But by 2010, it became quite apparent that there was nobody in this market, including Austin Ventures, who was focused on early stage tech investing here in this market. And that appeared to be a truly once in a generational opportunity to come and start a firm to exclusively focus on the Texas market. Tremendous conviction in 2009, 2010 that this market, Texas widely, had all the requisite DNA to be an absolute powerhouse of tech entrepreneurship. But what was fundamentally missing was early stage venture capital that would back, seed Series A companies that come out of this market. And so that became the basis for a colleague of mine from Austin Ventures and I came out to found LiveOak, and with the focus being on Texas-based tech and tech-enabled companies, where we are the first institutional investor for those types of businesses.
Well, so the name was Austin Ventures, but you're saying in 2010 there was this kind of gap. Was it the usual, the fund sizes got large, and so it was kind of moving away from that early stage? Is that kind of the nature of where the gap came from?
That's about right. The firm was Austin Ventures, founded in 1979. As I said, raised $3.2 billion over a 8-year period from 2000 to 2008. And in the process, the firm had massively moved away from its core early stage roots to, doing a lot of roll-ups, doing a lot of lower market technology buyouts and so on. And we strongly believe that early stage investing is a neighborhood sport, meaning you need to be focused on early stage entrepreneurs, work with them through the early parts of days of a company building process. And that kind of a real focus on the local market, local entrepreneurs was what was needed. And so that was a distinctive approach that was missing in this market. And you combine that with, and that's done well in a local context, in a neighborhood fashion. That became, and when you believe, and you're not doing this in, in some remote state, call it North Dakota, for example, there might not be as many technology capabilities or tech founders and entrepreneurs. You're doing it in the mighty state of Texas, which has got 2/3 of the tech jobs of California. It's the second largest producer of invention disclosures and patents. Mightily impressive STEM schools here, starting off with fabulous UT Austin right here, who are putting out thousands of STEM graduates here in this market. So it's got all this amazing DNA available in this market to be a powerhouse of tech entrepreneurship. And what was missing was early stage venture. And this supply to demand mismatch, this tremendous demand for capital, not enough supply of high quality local capital, became the genesis for why we would do this.
So what happened different in, I think it was, correct me on the date, like 2015, the time frame when Austin Ventures, went away? You think about a lot of, our institutions, players that are of that level. If they disappear, it ends up having a negative knock-on effect. While looking historically, and please correct the record if I'm misunderstanding what happened, it almost seemed like 1,000 flowers bloomed instead. And so there was actually this opportunity for people to get larger, like maybe like yourself or other new players to come in. And so why did it end up being a positive catalyst event rather than a negative event?
Yeah, I think, we are over reading too much into a 2015 news item for them to disappear or whatever it is. I think there's just a happenstance that happened at the time. And I think the characterization, that firm not spending time in early stages almost had happened for many, many years before that. Folks like us, when we came out in 2011 or so to raise the new fund, we wanted to go raise $100 million fund to be a real force, to be a full life cycle investor in companies. And by 2015, we had 15 companies in the portfolio. Right. And so maybe people started to associate the blooming happening after the 2015 news article about AV and so on. There's no correlation between those events, right? The fundamental point is this market has had tremendous talent, and we can unpack that a lot more as we go forward. And what was missing was the first round investors to take early companies, early ideas, and be the catalyzing force with accelerate company formation, catalyzing force in building teams out, helping companies get to product market fit are the things that are required. It requires a special skill, requires a real local understanding of these things to make it happen. And that's the resource we served here. We served in the market. We've continued to serve in this market all this time.
So it's an interesting looking at it that the reality on the ground, as you said, didn't really change. But it sounds like the narrative changed because maybe everyone was focusing so much on that headline. But did different opportunities, did perceptions from the outside, either the outside in or the inside out, change because of that headline?
I don't believe so. Largely for entrepreneurs, it was a non-event, to be honest. When our first investments happened in 2013, by then they were past that 5-year mark on the last fund and so on. It was a non-event.
The flywheel was already moving forward.
Yeah, that's right, very much so.
So how do you think of your investment thesis evolving from your starting point at Austin Ventures to when you founded LiveOak to today? I remember I was looking at some data going back to 2000 and just the Austin Metro's venture funding scene and what was the biggest sectors getting it. And like in the early days, it was, enterprise software was at like 16%. And then energy was at 14% and travel was high, to looking at today, health and prop tech and enterprise and fintech are all the highest. So how have you seen, what are you investing in? What's the overall thesis? And is it matching and changing with the evolution of Texas in itself?
Yeah, I'll just say very briefly, in the 2000-2005 timeframe, this place was known not only for enterprise software, you also had semiconductors, servers, a lot of hardware investments and stuff like that, right? And so obviously many of those have become out of fashion. For us as LiveOak, since our first investment in 2013, we are intentionally all about geography first. 100% in Texas. Today we've invested in about close to 70 companies where we are broadly first institutional investor in a Texas HQ company here. And so there has been no change at all since the founding days of LiveOak in terms of what needs to happen. But what intentionally we are is a multi-segment in nature. We've got amazing companies in legal. We took a company where we called Disco, where we were the investors at the time of formation of the business in 2013 December, took it public in the New York Stock Exchange in July of 21 with the ticker symbol LAW. I was chairman of the board until last week for the business. And so our biggest success story is $0 to $150 million business. And so we didn't anticipate when I raised fund one that we'll have a legal tech business here, right? And then we've done amazing stuff in prop tech. We've got some of the best prop tech companies in the nation on the portfolio right now. So the portfolio for us matches where is talent taking us. Where there is world-class talent is where the LiveOak portfolio is and will be in the future. Our latest investment is an amazing healthcare company, right? Again, there is tremendous amount of surge of interesting companies in a wide variety of segments. Look, Texas is headquarters to 50 plus of the Fortune 500 companies. So the story here is you have tremendous amount of domain knowledge in very specific vertical markets. So a common investment thesis for us is vertical domain expertise. It might be in legal, it might be in healthcare, it might be in real estate, meets technology expertise, and a whole bunch of horizontal software as a part of that. In compliance tech, call center tech, HR tech, marketing tech, are all things that are part of it. And that could be that intersects as a horizontal software. So if you look at net, the portfolio here ends up having three broad buckets. Is these verticalized plays, verticalized software, verticalized technical services. Number two is horizontal enterprise software, like I said, which is compliance tech and maybe even legal tech or HR tech that goes after all kinds of industries. And number three would be a lot of infrastructure software. And Austin in particular is a tremendous cybersecurity town, meaning security software, data center infrastructure, or all would be the three broad areas of invest in. In all three, you have world-class talent today in Texas and growing pretty nicely in this market. And so the strategy very much has become doubling down on where amazing founders take us, who are exceptional in whatever they do, is probably, so that aspect of the strategy is identical to what we did early in the days of Austin Ventures to definitely early in the days of LiveOak, but with this blinders on emphasis on Texas. And the last part I'll tell you is you can see that we did a big rebrand beginning of this year where we talk about our strategy being all in on Texas, all in on founders, and all in on community. It simply epitomizes what we've been doing for the last dozen years, just said in a more powerful fashion. The one piece of that's become a newer element of strategy is this recognition about being all in a community here, where it's not just bringing the entrepreneurial community together. There's tremendous amount of work to be done in a part of the community that's getting left behind as a part of this. The rising tide is not raising all boats. So we're doing a lot of work with respect to our giving programs. The LiveOak Gives program we are incredibly proud of, which has given out over $1 million of grants to some amazing companies doing really good work in grassroots for vulnerable populations. We launched something called the LiveOak Scholars Program for economically disadvantaged kids going to college in Texas in STEM and business. And so we're doing a lot more work in community as a part of the ground building, building up the bottom of the pyramid in some sense to be part of the growth wave underway here in Texas. So those are some subtleties in the corners, changes in the corner that we're doing. But macro emphasis is completely unchanged from the 2012, 2011 timeframe back to the genesis of LiveOak, is to be simply all in on Texas, founders, and of course community, to be first institutional money, to catalyze entrepreneurial activity in this market, continues to be nothing unchanged about it.
Do you see, I want to pull the thread on the community a little bit, and that, do you see a change in the types of companies that we are doing in Austin and Texas, that there is a lot more of a physical component to it. So there's a different type of an employment base. Like we do have the very straight enterprise software, some of the like companies that you had mentioned, but I think about whether they're large companies, say like a Tesla or Samsung, that are here, that you have to build chips, you have to build, electric cars, rockets. But I see just a lot more of that intersection of the physical and the digital. And so it's not just the engineer, it is the person working in the factory. And I think that provides a greater middle class opportunity than, say, some of the more purely software oriented communities and ecosystems.
Some of these things which require a big physical component, as you put it, Jason, are just hard venture backable businesses, in my opinion. If you're trying to build a little technology innovation here and that works as a prototype, and then you've got to now show manufacturability of it, build a factory for it, it's an industrial bet. So I think, by and large, the vast majority of the way you describe physical, which involves making chips, making cars, will be difficult to be venture backable opportunities. So as a result, we still see predominantly our opportunities set being much more of enterprise software type things. Or I thought where you're going with this is there's a tech-enabled services element to it. We are building amazing prop tech companies which require loan officers, right? There is a longer tail of talent, not just your brilliant software engineers who are part of our companies, right? And so there is a longer tail of jobs that our companies touch because there are technology-enabled services, there are financial services companies that do interesting things in this market. But there is a lot of software opportunities to be in selling software to Tesla, selling software to Samsung, for example, especially if they have a large employment base in these markets, including, for example, SchoolLinks, a company in the portfolio, which is doing amazing work in terms of doing early career pipeline for kids in high schools who want to go take jobs here and want to go into work directly. They're providing a pipeline for making that happen. So we have interesting software companies that are capitalizing on this longer tail of activity here that will lead to more growth across many more sectors in this market.
Yeah, and I actually think that the tech-enabled services. I mean, look, we're going. It's 16 minutes in, and we're already, and the word AI is coming up. So probably a record there. But when I think about like the tech-enabled services, whether that be, you said, the loan officers or the health coaches, it's just the ability to do more when you start bringing in the co-pilots or whatever buzzword we want to use, that you can actually. I mean, we talked about before, like I invest in biohealth, and one of the issues that I've run into is whenever someone says like, oh yeah, we have coaches that we're helping that are part of our platform. Like, yeah, those are usually the first people to let go in hard times because they generally don't scale.
Yeah.
But when you start adding in these type of AI tools to be able to scale them a lot better, either because the easy questions are taken off their plate,
That's right.
or you're able to do things more efficiently. Now suddenly there's jobs that can be done by lots of different people.
Very true. But a thesis that we've always embraced on, okay, fine, I'm finally going to say it, AI, is we've had tremendous success in human-assisted AI in the portfolio. This is not a 24 phenomenon. Disco was the earliest in about 7 years ago to offer an AI-based managed service offering for review of documents, right? So that lawyers who could review a document a minute can now review 10, 15 documents a minute, because it really eliminates the feet from the shaft for people to bring things in. And the results are powerful if you look at some of the results with this company. Ojo, which is helping people find homes, has always had a human in the loop with AI for people to find the best fit homes for people. So any co-pilots kind of activity we have in prop tech, for example, just makes a loan officer be more effective, a call center agent or a real estate agent just be much more effective in doing these things happen. Our latest investment, so given your biohealth expertise here, Jason, is a company called OptMyCare up in Dallas. We just backed 2 doctors, one of them in particular being a brilliant nephrologist who had started a multi-specialty group in Dallas, and for the last 5 years has been working on machine learning. I would say AI is too strong, at least ML work to perhaps have the highest quality individual patient-based risk stratification heuristics and algorithms for making that happen. So, obviously, and then convert that into what care management should be done for all these people based on their risk persona is the second part of the work that you've done. You can't simply say, well, AI is going to do this for me. Geez, we don't require care coordinators to go make this happen. Ultimately, these are human-centric problems. They're patient-centric problems underway. So when we go deploy the risk stratification, care plans, and so on, ultimately requires an RN, a registered nurse, or requires a care manager to go cajole, coax a patient to make the tougher choices, take the tougher medicines, go to a new specialist, and so on. So critical human beings are not going away. They're definitely, their jobs are getting more efficient. They get to know what to focus on, what to prioritize. And so there's a lot of human assisted AI, but a human in the loop is a critical theme that we have that spans now, as I've given you three examples: legal, real estate, health, are all areas where we definitely see the role of AI, but definitely a huge human assisting that's happening in the process here to make these things happen.
How do you think about it? Those are three great examples of industries where there is entrenched players who extract value due to the complexity. And so a lot of times they don't, you can always see those great charts of like, here's where costs have gone up and here's where costs have gone down. And they don't want to necessarily take in these types of productivity software or tools just to get it broadly, because that will decrease the value that this group or that group is getting. How do you think about, breaking in or, winning in those types of sectors?
Yeah, I think the way we think about it, that's why we definitely adopt much more of an enterprise software mindset in these things. Workflow matters immensely in these kinds of markets. You need to provide them with a much more of a comprehensive, how are you simplifying, addressing, tackling the workflow, what are you trying to automate, how do they work with different panes of glass, and how does the software ends up inserting into key panes of glass in their daily work is important. Meaning, if AI simply comes in and says, I'm a magical point solution as a co-pilot here, I think there'll be this wow factor initially, but I think it'll struggle to remain relevant for them if it doesn't really fit into the workflow in an efficient fashion. So the key battle really is to take over a big chunk of the workflow, and wherein the AI ends up solving critical pieces of it, but the fight for workflow looks like a traditional enterprise software problem. What do you do, in a typical day? What can we take over it with software and not simply give you a bright shiny object that provides you with one little recommendation, but then you still have to go do the work for it? And if you're a care manager, what does your care management workflow look like, right? And of course, your AI can provide you interesting things, but you're still trying to replace a care management software that you go do. In Disco's case, you have a litigation workflow, a really complex piece that goes through millions of documents. Where Disco began is by owning the entire workflow for e-discovery. So it makes it easy now that we have 1,500 customers there doing that work. We can bring in AI that can make pieces of that workflow more efficient, is what one can do. So as a result, what we really, really pay attention to is, are you simply a point solution? Or are you having a definitive pathway and an approach to become ultimately mission critical software that's going to own pieces of workflow, become a system of record for doing something, is something we obsess and agonize about. What we don't like are, we think point solutions are roadkill when there is no pathways to ultimately owning the mind and hearts and minds and share of the workflow of what people do here.
So you were saying that your most recent investment was up in Dallas. How do you think? And you start with geography, but you start with Texas. Texas is a big place, and I think about at least the Texas Triangle. That DFW, Houston, San Antonio, Austin are very different nodes, and what is going on there, what works there. How do you think about the differences in the first principles of each of the triangle? Are there also overlap points that we can kind of leverage between them?
Yeah, look, we do think of the great market of Texas, in the Texas Triangle, Texas Quadrilateral. If you include San Antonio, definitely has got some interesting opportunities there as well. All the four markets are different, right? And it's got they're different from levels of expertise, entrepreneurial activity, areas of expertise are all different in the markets. Historically, given the 25 years of having done this, we have been very successful making money, building great companies in all the markets. Um, we are back to first principles work of how do you activate community in these markets? How do you bring good people together in these markets so that when you bring good people together, chemical reactions start to equal and entrepreneurial chemical reactions start to occur and good things come out of that. So at a very grassroots level, we are very focused on continuing to invest in time, invest in events to just bring people together on an organic basis pretty regularly and taking a distinct approach to each of the markets. Where are the interesting nodes exist in these markets? How do you get critical mass? And we just threw a San Antonio startup bash 2 weeks ago. It had fabulous 50 plus attendance of amazing people who I did not know existed, but because we've done the work to bring people into this, to come in and make it happen. And recently we did a cybersecurity bash in Austin, and that brought 25 who's who of cybersecurity folks in Austin. So you got to do the grassroots work to bring a community to attend some of these events. And then you hope and pray, and with our catalyzing activity, that good things will come out of these things.
So I want to bring it down kind of for our conversation now, really into Austin. So it was funny. It was like yesterday I was reading an article from ATX Today about how people have been complaining about change in Austin since 1884. So I think that the two constants in Austin are change and complaining about change.
That's right.
I do think, though, that the tsunami of change that's happened in COVID with founders, funders, talent, moving here during that wave was, I think, a pretty large change. What do you think is kind of from your perception as someone who's been here a while? How have you seen the environment change over the last 4 years?
Yeah, it's definitely what we used to depend upon from an entrepreneurial pipeline, company building pipeline perspective, company growth perspective, was much more of local talent maturation. You go through a success at Bazaarwise, you come back and do one more company. Well, it goes back to Tivoli. Tivoli was the original mother node here for amazing amount of startup activity in this market. People from Tivoli went to do Vignette, went to do SailPoint, went to do SolarWinds. Look, there are all these Bazaarwise, all these companies exist because they all can retrace their pathways, a lot of them back to Tivoli days. So you kind of wait for good companies coming out. So it'll be Discos and BigCommerce, the current generation of public companies, and out of that come the next generation of founders. What changed are two more profiles of people. Profile number one, of course, the maturation. Profile number two are people who have done well in other markets, who move here and now want to do their next startup here in Austin. So there's outstanding talent of migrants here who are doing their next thing in this market. Profile number three are people who just moved here, work for Google. I just happen to move here, and just because it's a much better place to live. When I think about being entrepreneurial, I'm going to do something here, right? So we definitely see personas one, not just one, two, and three as important as founders, and of course also as exciting additions to our portfolio is what we see here. Yes, that has slowed a bit, as people would clearly, it was crazy in 01, 01, 02. It's definitely slowed a bit, but it's still plenty. The personas 2 and 3 have been a big plus for this market. A lot of exciting talent available to go interesting things with. And that's what is propelling Austin to be on a faster acceleration as a legitimate entrepreneurial force of a town compared to what it used to be before.
So with that kind of growing group of the second and third type of founders and innovators, does it change the definition of what an Austin startup is?
Yeah, it's a great question. We used to ask that question deeply in the peaks of it in 22. What does it mean for us to be a geographically focused venture firm? What I would tell you is, at least with respect to that, the pendulum seems to have swung into a more stable ground here, which is founders or early employees, they want to get started. There's a lot of benefits in being in one physical office together because things are so dynamic, so fluid, and so on is what we see. And so we are back to seeing the definition of an Austin startup looking like principal founders. The majority of the principal founders, let's say the three founders, maybe two of them at least, are here, physically here in Texas. As a result, they look to build early critical mass of the core team, the first 5 to 10 employees, predominantly being here, so that they can iterate faster. They're not trying to do huddle rooms constantly in Zoom to go even do that as they get through product market fit, etc. Here, we definitely see back in 24 again, not completely, of course, like pre-pandemic, but we see much more of that notion of what a center of gravity looks like here, associated with the critical members of the core team being here. So for us, that's important. We like to back people where it's not like one single founder in this market and everybody else is elsewhere, because our value prop is, look, we can actively engage with you through your company build-out process, whiteboard with you as much as you want, find good talent to staff into your company as much as possible, be there to look around corners with you based on our vast experience in this market, is what we can do here. So we still over-index on critical mass being in this market. And what I would tell you is in 2024, I just see that to be much, much more prevalent than what it felt like the world was heading towards, say, in 2021 here.
So that second and third bucket was a lot focused on the founders and the talent. The capital and VC market has also drastically changed. You had a number of Silicon Valley folks move here from smaller funds to giant funds. How have you seen the capital market change? Do you find yourself collaborating, competing on the same deals? Are there really two different types of deals? Is it a little bit of both? What is the kind of the nature of the funding market?
I tell you, from a core ethos perspective at LiveOak, I would put us amongst the most collaborative of folks in general, the venture business. Strongly believe it takes a village. We are very open to syndicating, co-leading investments with folks, and I would put us amongst the most collaborative venture firms that exist in terms of building things up, and don't have the sharp elbows to say it's us, it's us or nothing kind of a thing. Is not how we approach. So I think first of all, so as a result, we're very, very welcoming, working with local folks, working with out of town folks, and so on. Number two, what I would tell you is, again, delighted there are massive firms that are headquartered here. Going back to Vista being headquartered here, and then the big news came about Mithril, and then Sapphire and 8VC and so on, right? I think it's a difference between people locating here, right, versus doing the grassroots work in terms of really having multi-year relationships with amazing local founders, being there from a company building perspective with a deep network here to go make things happen. Is just a different style. And if I come back to how many folks are doing that with a local focus, it's a very small number. So from that perspective, I would tell you the landscape has not changed that much. You definitely have big name firms who are technically domiciled here, but not much of a real change with respect to their original investment strategy of just doing whatever they used to do before. And I think, again, it requires a different approach, a different mindset, a different kind of a commitment to be able to harness the grassroots potential of this market, building solid relationships with local folks who are here, and more importantly, being there for the company building aspects of it. The resources we bring to the table for an entrepreneur to build out a company here is absolutely second to none. And that's the value prop we bring to folks to say that, look, you founder might have relationships on a nationwide basis. We welcome collaborating with anybody else if you need to. But look, for the early days of company building, there is no substitute for having a local partner who's going to be there in the trenches with you through the vagaries and the uncertainties of what it takes to get escape velocity for your business. You get limitless to whatever we can provide, as much opportunity, as much capability and support as possible, which will be second to none to make that happen.
So I want to think a little bit about the nature of innovation and how it happens in an ecosystem. And I like to use the term creative collisions, right? You want the right people, the right ideas to mix and match. How much are you seeing that happening today? Is it happening at like the long-standing institutions and groups and spots? Is it happening at newly formed ones? Is it not happening as much as it should be? Like, where are you seeing it happening in the ecosystem?
It's definitely, look, Jason, it's something we obsess and worry about a lot. I shouldn't say worry, we obsess about a lot, right? Look, we want to meet every single exciting founding team in the state of Texas, and perhaps we'll back them. Perhaps at a minimum, we'll be supportive, helpful to them in any possible fashion. But this franchise is all about the LiveOak franchise is all about building an authentic relationship with every single one, where is that outcome of a creative coalition in this market. So it's a question we agonize a lot. We are trying to be creators of such creative collisions as much as possible by throwing everything from our fun LiveOak Startup Bash. Had 350 people show up 2 weeks ago at Loro. We should put you on the list for next time to come and be part of that. To the cybersecurity beer bash, which had incredibly curated 26, 27 people who showed up for it, right? And so we are trying to be the catalyst of these creative coalitions, create more intensity and provide capital and connections to go make those things happen, right? That's something to think about. So obviously, when new people come into town, they don't have a network, and so we are trying to find, it's very sparser graphs compared to what the graphs used to look like pre-pandemic. So we're trying to figure out, connect the dots in the sparser nodes in the sparser graph to activate, find people who are all meeting in little bitty smaller clusters because of the people they know were limited when they came into this town. We are constantly connecting baby trees, baby graphs, into pull them into the network, because it increases the likelihood of these creative collisions leading to something of fruition, is something we think a lot about. So again, it's a shout out to anybody here who's a recent migrant, recent mover into this market. Please reach out to us. At a minimum, what we'll offer you is to connect you into the broader network here. Is something that we'll do so that they can thrive more, capitalize on this broader network more, and be part of something bigger and more promising and exciting.
And how do you think the artistic and creative communities factor into our innovation scene?
There are a lot of it depends on what you mean by artistic creative. If it's the music composers and songwriters who are in plenty here, right? I don't know, but of course I have a nonprofit side of this where I'm also happen to be on the board of Austin PBS, and I'm actually vice chair currently of Austin PBS, and we have a massive mission-driven media company's story there, and so we are trying to really activate the creative community and make Austin PBS a powerhouse of creativity and content and so on.
Let me share with you a mental model that I have. So I have a theory that for ecosystems to really thrive and kind of reach that next tier, there are 3 archetypes that you need in the ecosystem, and ideally also you have people that personify multiple archetypes, right? So you have the builders, which founders, funders, innovators, and talent. You have the storytellers, which is basically the creative community and the media community, who both inspire the builders and also are telling and crafting our narratives. And then you have what I call the philosophers, which are the scientists, academics, and intellectuals, which are expanding our understanding of the world and the universe. And so, in those overlapping areas, and you have obviously the people that interact. And so coming from, and when I came from San Diego, and I loved that community, and there was a great example at the time, is there was a distinct lack of storytellers. If I'd always asked people how big it was, nobody knew how large San Diego's ecosystem actually was, because it was just builders. And so when I think about the creative communities, sure, both as the inspiring and moving us forward to the, hey, this is how we're building out the narrative, and here's the coolness factor that is attracting people to Austin. So that's how, when I think of the creative and artistic communities, that's kind of the way I think about it for innovation.
Yeah, I don't think of them to be honest, to be distinctive archetypes here, Jason. I think of the greatest builders, the ones who are innate storytellers too, right? Who are building and are just really dreaming big to take on, global domination, whatever they do. So at a core level, I think of at least the first two to being integrated into, well, we back a lot of amazing product people. A lot of good product people, product managers, fundamentally are builders, meets storytellers in some sense, is some of the DNA that where they come into these things. So we look for a standard LiveOak deal looks like, often there is a first act for the company, which is you're a blinders on builder to go solve a very specific problem. The market size might not be as big, but you know how to really intersect and do something great. But we acutely also think about what an act two looks like. An act two, which is where your initial beachhead in act one gives you the license and an unfair advantage to go after a much, much bigger market out there. And we've got repeated examples of Act 1 and Act 2 in the portfolio. But even the ability to imagine what does Act 2 looks like really requires that storytelling capability as a part of the founder, right? And so we're looking for those personas often integrated in the core founding team here is what we look for, so that we can really able to characterize what you have to, of course, have to have a first act. You have to get to the first beachhead and show some real critical mass and escape velocity there is needed. But to earn the license and the freedom to dream about what the act two looks like. But in the absence of an act two, this might be a much more of a capped outcome here for this business. So we're looking for that combination intrinsically in things that we do naturally.
So what do you think are the biggest gaps that we still have in the ecosystem to kind of go from where we are as a thriving, strong innovation system to kind of that superstar status? Is it scale of different aspects, or is there something else, a different gap that we're missing?
Yeah, we're doing much better with talent. I used to be very worried about talent. We are doing much better with, let me tell you what we're doing better at, and let me tell you the big gaps, right? We're doing much better at mid-level scaling, mid-sized company talent. What does it take to go from 10 to 50, for example, type of talent there is a lot more of, given migrations, given enough number of companies have been through that level of scaling that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years. We're doing much better. That's an area we're seeing a lot more. Obviously, we're seeing a lot more of formation activity has been very, very strong. The pipeline is the best ever I've seen in this market. So those are two areas. When companies get to be $100 million plus, let's say, we are still sparse with respect to talent sets associated with how many super experienced public company CFOs in this market do we have, right? How many really at scale chief revenue officers are there who have done $200, $300 million kind of revenue businesses. So we are lighter on the 9-figure company size kind of talent, just because you just haven't had that many successes of that ilk here in the last 10 years. So I would give it not the great, fabulous grade I gave the first two. And the last area where we can definitely have more is capital, right? And I think money overall is highly localized for first money. By the time you get to double-digit millions of revenues, money travels very easily. Money is very fungible. You can get national, global money to come and look at companies because you got data to look at and so on. You don't have to be local, etc. In that zone in between first money in that we provide to the the $2 to $7 million of revenues, for example, early product market fit established, you're trying to invest a little bit. It's kind of the Series A's, for example, is lighter here with respect to capital in this town. We'd love to see a lot more capital being available for that. But it's kind of requires a quasi-local presence, and at least much more time commitment in this market sort of thing is needed. And that continues to be a gap in this market here.
So Krishna, this has been great and really informative. I always like to end with the same question. What's next, Austin?
There is obviously continues to be tremendous areas of promise and excitement where Austin takes all these newfound riches. When I say riches, newfound talent, and with its traditional strengths in vertical markets, to go to the next wave of continuing to this amazing wave of new company formation, growth, and scaling. Do much more of the same. Number two is what we'd like to see is to have a lot more long-term standalone business in this market, which is companies go public and then they get acquired, happened with HomeAway, VRBO into Expedia. Obviously, the latest news that BigCommerce is in the market to be sold. National Instruments got sold. I'd like to see a lot more of existing standalone businesses that exist with true headquarters here in this market, as opposed to getting subsumed in this market. And that the next 5 years hopefully will show much more of that. And number three is we just have to be really mindful of the long tail of humans in this market, which is, there is a well-characterized affordability crisis, well-characterized infrastructure that needs to keep up here, and so on. We got to make sure that teachers and first responders and so on can find this town affordable, and be this critical service sector here, needs to survive, and so on. So all of these things we worry about a lot in terms of the long tail that might not be as positively benefited as the rising tide is not benefiting everybody, are all things that, so what I'm really convinced to, what, maybe or not in the second bucket, to the third bucket being, gosh, we have to do more for the community, would be the three big things I would say from what's next perspective.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.